All right, welcome back, you guys. Fine Danny Podcast. This week we have a guest with us. We have Francisco from the Anointed Men Podcast. We appreciate you for coming out and joining us today. I think this is going to be a really interesting one since we all kind of have, I think, differing views on the subject and then how we kind of go about, approaching that in our daily lives. So I'm really glad to have him here and kind of discuss things with us. This one's good. We're going to be covering a little bit mostly religion, and hence the name Anointed Men Podcast. So I appreciate you
Yeah,
for joining us this week, man.
yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So was there a reason you decided to start a religious podcast specifically? Like, you felt moved by the religion, you really wanted to get kind of get the word out there and spread that to other people?
Yes, correct. So I've gone through my own trials and tribulations of life, and it got to a point where I kept running from the faith for a long time. And I just felt like, now is the time to put this information out there. So
That's fire, dude. I mean, so what brought you to like podcasting though? Like, was it just like like in the times, like people are starting podcasts, or do you have like a media background of any kind?
yeah, so before the podcast, I actually had I had a soccer league, and so I had a soccer league for almost 3 years, and so we did 2 seasons of that, and it went pretty good. It just the only thing where we lacked was the financial aspect of it. Like we weren't making as much profit as would have hoped for. So we had to kind of go back to the drawing board and be like, hey, all right, guys, what do y'all want to do with this? Like, do we keep going? Do we take a chance? Like we've blown up in the sense that we're starting to get notoriety around town, but it's like we're not making any money. So it's like if we have a business, we're not making any money. Like, what's the point? Like you can't just keep going. And so when I first started, I was working at the refinery. Like, money was not an issue.
Yeah.
So now that I'm not at the refinery anymore, I really had to think about what my next move was gonna be. And so I was like, you know what, let's just scrap the whole thing. Let's take our losses where we can, and let's start something new. Now, obviously, the person that I was doing the league with, like, we kind of went our own separate ways, and I was like, well, I have this platform now with, at the time, I think I had like 2,000 some followers, and I was like, what am I gonna do with this? I'm like, I have people that are looking. I know half of them are believers because I got to mingle with a lot of them during that time. So I was like, I just kind of one day I was just like, you know what? Let me start a podcast. Like everybody else has a podcast. I'm like, why not?
So in the midst of I guess between the soccer league and kind of coming off of that, you kind of found yourself in a place where you were like furthering into your religion, you would say, and you
Correct.
kind of were wondering where to go from there, and you kind of just wanted to spread the word
Yeah.
at
So
that
like,
point.
yeah. So like when I first came to the faith, it was 2012, and it was through some weird circumstances. I was going through some pretty rough times at the time, and I just started trying to seek the truth. I was like, you know what? Like, I ended up going with the Mormons. I ended up going with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I grew up Catholic, never kind of just really resonated to me. And so when I finally stumbled upon Christianity, I was like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm onto something. And I'm like, that's where I felt the most connected, the source. And so that's kind of led to a whole, what is it, 13 years of, in and out. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, like I've said before on other podcasts, and on my own. I'm like, I've been lukewarm for a long time, and I think about a year and a half ago, I gotten sick from COVID, and I also told the story as well, and so I almost died from COVID, and yeah, and
You were in the hospital for
yeah,
it? Oh
twice
man.
at the ER.
Wow.
Um, and the first time I got COVID, I was like, man, yeah, I got a little bit sick, it's just like the common flu or whatever. Like 2 weeks out, then I got back up the first time. No, this time it was like, man, I was having all kinds of residual symptoms and just all kinds of things. Like, it ranged from high blood pressure to low blood pressure, like some bad temple headaches, dude. And I was just like, what the heck's going on? And it's like in those moments where you realize, like, dude, like, all those close friends and stuff like that, like where are they? You know what I mean? It's like, and I just kind of had my family to lean on at the time. And so it was one of those things where it's just like, man, I really had to bend the knee and be like, God, like, where are you? Like, I know I've been a pretty bad person for most of my life, in the sense that, I'd done some bad things, and it's like everybody, we all stumble, right? And but it was definitely a wake up call. It's like once you get that brush with death, that's when you start to realize, like, hey, when they were here, and the next weekend be gone. And so throughout that year and a half, I've had a whole bunch of friends pass away. And so I was just like, man, I got to a point where I was like, dude, like, what's going on? Like, I have no idea. Like, my best friend, my buddy that I went to high school with, his name was Ivan Lopez. We bought a house together, like right across from each other. And we drifted apart during that time. And he ended up dying, dude. Like, I think it was like a month or two after I had COVID. And he was in a car crash. Yeah, he was in a car crash, dude. Coming back from Texas City, actually. Because he had been out over here with some friends. And he was trying to make it all the way back to Wesley. And so I was like, dude. And, you know, he had his run-ins. You know, he had his warning signs before. I was actually part of that first warning sign when he had a Camaro SS at the time. And this was 2013. He had T-boned a guy. And because he had, I'm not going to sit here and shy away from it, but he was running from a cop. He was literally running from a cop on the port, you know, and we tried to flee from the cop. We ended up T-boning this guy. Now, the way everything worked out was when the cop showed up, it wasn't Deer Park. So the cop that was following them was a Deer Park cop. And so we were right on the boundary of like Pasadena.
Almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he lost the cop after that. But Pasadena cops had gone a call from the intercom like, hey, there's a guy in a white, sports vehicle.
Can't miss him. He's on the
way. Exactly. And so the officer, it was a lady officer. She told him like, I heard what happened over the intercom, and we get like Deer Park sometimes too. She's like, and I know you've been drinking, and she's like, but I'm gonna go ahead and just like I'm gonna let you off on this one. Like, but I could have taken you to jail right now. And I was like, dude, like I was just a passenger. My other homeboy Jaime was a passenger too. But we were just so shooken up by it that I was like, dude, this has to be like a warning sign for all of us. Like I hadn't been drinking that night. They had, but like I didn't have a seatbelt on. So like I could have flown out, right. But I didn't. I mean, granted, I did have back problems after that, but it was one of those things, dude, where I was just like, dude, like you really need to take this as a life lesson, dude.
It definitely is,
because
has to be an eye-opener.
We told you before you got on the road, like, hey, give me the keys or whatever. So for a long time, he did chill. He chilled for a long time. And so, fast forward 10, 12 years later, 11 years later, and, he was out and about again. And, granted, I do say this, and I haven't said this before, but the signs of depression were there. Yeah. We didn't notice it.
Yeah.
And so, it sucks for me because I got to live with this. Like, hey, they were there, but we chose to ignore them, And we weren't the best friends sometimes. And like he was always kind of like the guy we didn't put him down, but it's just like we're kind of harsh with him. And so when everything starts to develop around that time, I just felt like crap, dude. Right. I was like, damn, dude, like, and I had to live with it. But God is good, because in that situation, like a week before he passed away, I had told him like, hey, my son's having a fundraiser. He's selling some lollipops for like 50 cents or whatever it was. Always a great friend, stand up guy. He came through. He's like, man, I'll buy 20. I'm like, dude, thank you. Instead of having to go, door by door and all this other stuff. He came through, and so I feel like God allowed us the opportunity to be able to say our goodbyes, even though I didn't perceive it as a goodbye at the time. And so when I got that phone call that following Saturday, dude, I was just like, bro, what the heck? I was like, so it was, everything happened so quickly. Like, he died instantly. He flew out his windshield because he didn't have a seatbelt on. And then he had a barricade apparently. So, yeah, dude. When I got that news, it was rough, man. And that's so having to deal with the after symptoms of COVID and all this stuff, because it goes hand in hand. Like however you're feeling, it goes hand in hand with the virus or with the COVID thing. Because it's like replicating. That's a whole other thing.
So you were saying that, I guess around kind of like after all of this stuff, that happened, you got COVID. And so I'm assuming during this time, it's kind of like a searching within yourself. You kind of wondering why all this stuff is happening.
Absolutely.
And you also said that you kind of like not jumped around, but like we're looking into a lot of other religions. What made you in this time that you were searching within yourself? What made you fall onto Christianity? What made you kind of come into that?
And I guess, well, let me add one more thing. I guess a specification. You say you're a Christian. When you say that, what do you mean by that? Because I know there's like so many different denominations. Are you like non-denomination?
Yeah, I would identify more as evangelist, Christian evangelist, because I know there's like Lutheran, Baptist, there's so many of them, but I could identify more in the range of like Christian evangelism.
Is that like I forgot what the theological term is, but it's basically like you go by the Bible kind of word for word. You take it as like face value.
Christian
Correct.
evangelist is a preacher. Oh, well, I guess not a preacher, but someone who seeks to spread the Christian message of salvation through Jesus Christ, often through public preaching and teaching, with the goal of bringing people to faith and spiritual renewal. I feel like that's all Christian. Wait, I feel like this is not accurate.
It's very vague.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, because you have to remember, like there was like the
Don't trust AI, everybody.
No, but you didn't read further. It says they believe that the Bible is the inherent word of God and personal.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I was saying.
the wrong part.
AI is not perfect yet.
AI is not perfect.
But also historically, it refers to like that the revitalization, like the Great Revitalization period, where I mean it was like in the early like I want to say 1700s, where a lot of the early Protestant departures from the Catholic Church were formed essentially, where they kind of, if you've ever been to Catholic Church or not, you know, like they have a very archaic way of going through the Bible,
systematic.
Whereas like evangelists kind of came around and were like, we can bring some spirit and bring some energy to these words, and that's where you get like the quote unquote stereotypical black church is like probably the peak example of that, where everyone is super over
lively and
that's
correct.
like that's like
Yeah.
downstream from like that initial evangelist movement of like kind of not just scripture such and such, like reading it like it's like bringing in like, hey, okay, if you do this, like this type of thing, just bringing energy to the religion, I guess.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said before, like I grew up Catholic, so everything, and it's not to bash Catholicism. Like I have a lot of friends that
You can
devout.
bash Catholics. It's fine.
I was also raised Catholic too.
Okay, yeah. So like the way what I found through Catholicism is that everything's very systematic, in the sense that like, okay, you got to do this, don't do this, and it's just like, why, and nobody ever had any questions for these things, and it just like Christianity was different. It's like come as you are, and then you're supposed to be a renewed being after that, right?
Yeah.
And so I just felt more comfortable, and like, and when I went to the Mormons, for example, like they have this belief of like, hey, you die, and maybe I'm getting it wrong, but this is what I understood from it. It's like you can become your own god once you die and rule over your own planet.
To be fair, that was like that religion came way later. It was a dude called he's not wrong. That is true. That is true. But it was created by it was created by a guy named Joseph Smith. It was in Utah, which is why there's so many Mormons in Utah. Because that's where it was founded. Yeah, but exactly. So, but yeah, he basically was like, I don't like any of these other religions, and created his own. So I understand where some people might think he's a Messiah or similar, because people view him similar to as they would Jesus or Muhammad.
I mean, the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's like what the technical term for Mormons are. They found like he claims that he found like the golden bars with like the inscription on it, and then like the golden bars like dematerialized or whatever, and like that's kind of like the big thing with this one is like the golden bars that like no one could find or whatever. But a lot of people, I mean, looking into like the onset of a lot of the different like manifestations of spirituality, there's a lot of interesting things. Because I will say, like, as crazy as it sounds, the Church of Latter-day Saints did get like when it quote unquote popped off, it was a lot of people who had no reason to all like randomly, collectively, all just tell the same lie. It was like people who were just living normal lives who just happened to be in the same place, and
They're like, yeah,
Well,
that's it.
I mean, they all came back with like the exact same story, which just seems like bizarre. Because like I want to say some of them were even killed for it. It's like
Yeah.
they were even died for like their beliefs in this sense. So it's like kind of bizarre that they would like take that with them to the grave. You know.
I mean, yeah, at one point you got to think polytheism was, it took precedent in majority of civilization. Everyone prayed to the rain
Yeah.
god or the sun god. So for people to come and say that there's something other than that, which in any point in civilization, if you were going against, because even at a point Jesus was going against whatever was
the
happening
Roman
in
Empire. Yeah.
the Roman Empire at that point in time. So obviously, they did what oh no, what happened with the
We're good.
okay, cool. But essentially what they do what every civilization does when they don't like what you're preaching.
Right.
They kill them. So it is kind of crazy though, cuz a lot of those religions, I think when you other than maybe wait, what happened? Okay, cool. Other than like Mormonism, I would say that a lot of other religions are similar in a lot of
Right.
ways. So I mean, it is kind of what you were saying, Evan, where in the sense that a lot of these people were coming with similar stories at the time, and a lot of society at that point in time didn't want to take that on until, of course, the Roman Empire,
Right.
Jesus, they crucified Jesus, and then Constantine realized that he could use Christ essentially as like a means to bring the Roman Empire together, because it was collapsing at that point in time, and he was losing power, and so. But there were already churches kind of rising up at that point in time around that did believe that Jesus was the Son of God. So he kind of capitalized on that and took that. Which then also we've talked about this before too, is like the Council of Nicaea, which around that time is whenever because once they kind of adapted Christianity into the Roman Empire, weirdly enough, Christians couldn't even agree on what Christianity was entirely.
No, of
So
course
then
not.
they were like, well, this is
Yeah.
what Christianity is, and then other people were like, no, this is what Christianity is. So they brought all of the what we know as popes essentially,
Mhm.
or cardinals, I guess
Yeah,
you would
yeah,
say as cardinals, and they gathered all the ones from all the different churches that ran over that area, and basically created the first, I guess, technically writings of like the Bible essentially, where
Like
they
the
were kind of
Yeah,
Gospels,
the New
yeah,
Testament.
Gospels. Yeah, where it was like, this is kind of what Christianity is, and this is what it states. So there was more of a structure for people
Yeah.
to go off of.
I would
so.
say
Instead of
that's-
just random manuscripts and papyrus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's what's like super interesting about not just Christianity, but specifically like the Abrahamic religions. Like they just seem like, looking back on history, to have been like super sticky. You could come up with whatever reason why, like for some reason, like in different sects of the world, like the Abrahamic religion, like just popped off. Like even Islam, for example, like when Muhammad first got the scriptures from the angel, or at least that's how the story goes. It was in a time, like how Dandy was saying, is it was in a time of like great polytheism. So essentially, in that time, whenever he came and went to the cave and like wrote the book or whatever, everyone already had like multiple gods. So the fact that like he was able to actually like basically convert all of these people to monotheism, and also the same story that he's saying specifically referenced Jesus, like the angel that talked to him was like, Jesus is real, like this, he was a prophet, so on and so forth. It's like it's a interesting chronology, I would say, at least in comparison to a lot of the other spiritualities. I mean, I think what is like the next biggest one is like Buddhism, and that's like not even really the same thing. Like they're not like worshiping Buddha at all. It's like that's not
his
what
teaching.
It is.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
weird because a lot of these, when you think of prophets over time, right, like Muhammad or Jesus, Confucius, Buddha, they all just kind of came with the teachings of love and enlightenment,
Correct.
but in a different way. And I liked what you said earlier, like the source, right? Because I actually use that term a lot, which is kind of returning to what home, so to speak, or returning
For
to the
sure.
point in which you're born, or like where you came from, and returning to that. Because personally, I'm not like religious in a structural point of view. Like
Mhm.
I don't really kind of I guess attach myself to any specific religion. I would say I am spiritual in the sense that I do believe something created us. Whether or not what that is, I'm not entirely sure. But there are a lot of people who had teachings over time that were, hey, basically, if you're kind to yourself, you're kind to others.
For sure.
You kind of separate yourself from the ego. All these things, then you could return home essentially, or to the source in which you came from. But it is kind of crazy because, like, with Jesus specifically in the Christian religion, they're like, this is the Son of God.
Correct.
Which is weird because they kind of reject all these other people. But in a sense, if you think about it, all these other prophets were also the Son of God, so to speak, in that same sense.
Yeah, I think the difference between Jesus and, for example, Buddha or Muhammad was that Jesus was the only person that claimed to be the Son of God. Everybody else did not claim to be the Son of God. So I think even Buddha on his deathbed, and you might want to cross-reference this, but he said that there will be a Son of Man that will come. And so I thought that detail was very fascinating too, because it's almost like he foretold, like, hey, or he had an idea of what was either to come or to came. I can't remember when he died exactly.
And it's gonna be that guy.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to the Roman Empire. I actually took a class in college about that, and they said the fall of the Roman Empire was actually because of the language barriers that they had. So it was too many people, way too much area to cover, so they lost control of it. And then you had people, let's say in the north, that were speaking a different a different tongue, dialect, and so you'd have people from the north coming to the south that did not understand each other, because again they were so segregated in the sense, like like map wise, like geographical wise. And so I thought that was pretty cool when I took that class. I was like, I did not know.
I do have a question for you though, because this is something that interests me. Is like a lot of people who do are devout Christians, so to speak. I think it's interesting because a lot of them tend to really follow the Old Testament, which is said to be taken from the Torah originally, a lot of those teachings, right? But the thing about that is the New Testament, in a way, it doesn't denounce it, but it's kind of like the Old Testament is pushed to the side, in a sense. God is like, that's not what I am anymore. I'm bringing my son, and I'm sacrificing my only son so that these things of the past are no longer viable. These are like null and void.
God went through prison reform.
Essentially, God was saying, like, I am sacrificing my son so that you no longer have to go through these things, before all these, the wraths that I bestowed upon all of the people, whether it was like the floods or
like
what was it, the locusts, and or no, that's gonna be that's gonna be Judgment Day. But yeah, so like the floods and all the other stuff that he kind of brought upon the people.
The plague did come during Moses. Like, so
the plague,
you're on point. You're on point. And so, I said there's a part in the New Testament where it says, like, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. And so Moses was the one that was presented with the law from the beginning, with the commandments. Obviously, a lot of people, at the time, they could not keep up with all these laws. And so God's like, well, okay, we need to do something about this. And so that's why he sent his only begotten son to be sacrificed, and for everybody that believes in him, can live forever. And so I think it was the fulfillment of the law, because again, these people they claim to be Jews, but they weren't. And so I know for a fact, like, a lot of Orthodox Jews, they abide just by the Torah, and that's fine. But you have to see the similarities, for example, in the book of Isaiah, that speaks of the foretelling of Jesus. And it's hard to deny, it's hard to deny that. It's like he's speaking of Jesus, but people, they don't perceive it like that. And if you have a conversation with a Jew, now they can't explain it. They're like, well, no, that just means, they try to kind of blow it off.
I would say, like, the Jews, unfortunately, as is the norm in the Old Testament, misinterpreted God, or arguably misinterpreted God / tried to enforce their own will on God's will, where they had an idea of the type of savior that they wanted, which was a savior, honestly, much like Muhammad. Honestly, like, they were basically waiting for someone like that, someone that would violently free them from the chains of their captors. Like, that's what they were hoping for. And when Jesus came about and he was like, well, why don't we just love everybody? They were like, no.
Yeah, that doesn't like, fit into our plans, into our agenda.
Yeah, they were like,
yeah,
no. And I guess I would say on the Old Testament, I mean, I actually really like the Old Testament. I think if you take it at face value, obviously it'll be very hard to accept. I mean, there's just really nothing else to really say about that. That being said, I think if you understand that this is like a collection of wisdom from like thousands of years ago that was presented to people thousands of years ago, and you read it through that lens, there's like a lot of like really interesting things that I think are still true. Like, for example, my biggest takeaway from the Old Testament is that humans are the problem and we are the cause of all of our problems, and that if anything, God tries to help us by preventing us from hurting
Correct.
ourselves, but we just can't. Like, we just are just not able to like be not kind of evil in a way. Like, we're just, as a mass, as a macro.
Well, that was the whole point of like the original sin, though, wasn't it? You know, that like once you get that knowledge and once you bite the
Yeah.
apple, you'll eternally always kind of
Well,
be
well,
engulfed
that's the
in
thing.
that.
It's like beautifully entwined in free will. It's almost like the ability to make decisions will naturally lead you to sin, because you are always going to make a decision from the perspective of yourself. Like, you won't have the perspective of the universe. You will have the perspective of you as an individual. And so, like, even without a notion of morality, you're just going to act in self-preservation. Like, this is what life, when we look at the animal kingdom, well, this is what life just does. Like, this is just what happens naturally. So, like, when you have consciousness on top of that natural instinct, you're still kind of a slave to like your self-preservation, but you're supposed to, or you have the ability to actually do a good thing instead of just following that norm, right? And the whole idea, I would say, of the original sin is to show, like, specifically, God made Adam and Eve do like, basically, that was all meant to happen, right? Because it was for the whole point of showing that humans have the ability to go against God, right? And in doing that, it shows that we have free will.
But
That's
it's
kind of
like,
the whole point.
yes, but also like where I would like to push back is the conversation of free will itself, because what you're presenting is this idea that like God has, like, basically, I guess what I'm trying to get the point across to is that if we inherently are evil, then isn't God just basically like the fucking spotlight in a dark room, basically, where it's like, if it, what's the expression about idle hands, where it's like idle hands is the devil's playground, basically.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, so if that's true, then everyone's always in the devil's playground unless that you're serving.
The whole idea is, yeah, if you're like you're supposed to constantly be serving in a godly way, right? You know, and that, because if not, then yeah,
you're part of the
you're
problem,
part of the
basically.
problem. But this is kind of, I guess, the way that I perceive that thought is where, so in a sense, whenever God created us, we kind of were similar to animals, other than the fact that we were made supposedly in His image, right? So we didn't yet have the consciousness of necessarily what the world was at that time. We were just created as something in His kingdom, right, or an extension of His kingdom. And by biting the apple, that symbolizes us kind of gaining that consciousness and awareness of the world outside of Him, you know, outside of this kingdom that He has created, which then at that point on, you are living, so to speak, in sin from that point on, because you're no longer living beside God, you're living outside of God, right?
Yeah.
So there's a verse in Ecclesiastes where it says that God created mankind upright. They went in search of many ventures. And so we were created in His image, but again, it's a constant fight between flesh and spirit. And so we're constantly torn between literally what God wants us to do and what God created us to do versus what it is that Francisco wants to do. And I struggle with that long time, dude. I'm someone that's indulged in so many things, dude.
It's like an ego conversation.
Yeah,
like
for sure,
like
dude.
once you strip down like the who you think you are, what's left, and then that's what you
And that's
might
what
need to
sin
be doing,
leads to.
basically.
Like, it feels so good at the time, and you're just like, man, this is great. You know, the women, the parties, the money. It's all great because I've been there. But it's like, again, once you strip all that away, what are you? You know?
Mhm.
And it's like, I felt empty, dude. For a long time, I just felt like a void. Like, it was empty. And it's just like, man, dude, like, I just couldn't really understand it outside of just feeling dark, man.
It's because you're trying to fill something that you can't, right?
Yeah.
You're like, if I have this, then I'll be happy, or if I have this, then I'll be happy. But then you realize you don't really have anything at all.
Correct.
Like, what really is any of that? What does any of that really mean at the end of the day? Because when you're alone, like at home by yourself, you still have to deal with that.
That's when
And
I
who you
believe you
are.
got to face your demons is when you're by yourself. And some of the biggest battles I had was when I was by myself. And when I had just bought my house, I'm like, that was the first time living by myself, away from home, and we were always like a close knit family. So like when I was there, that's when I was like, man, dude, like depression hit, like I'm not gonna lie to you, like I've never said this before, but suicidal thoughts hit, and it's just like, like you think you're gonna fill that with other things, but it does not.
When the quiet gets quieter.
Yeah.
It's whenever or loud. Like honestly, I've had like on multiple different like psychedelic trips where I was just like out of my mind, like trying to like get back to earth. It was like no music playing, nothing going on, and like no sound, but like I'm like covering my ears, bro. Like this silence is so loud.
Yeah.
And it was just like speaking to me in those moments. It was just like basically how much of the thoughts that I've been avoiding or been pushing off were just like flooding in at that moment, and all I could hear was like myself screaming type shit. And it's weird because like once you shut off the noise, once you shut off the TVs and everything, it's like I'm still hearing something. So I'm still hearing the fucking water flow through the pipes and the fucking washer downstairs, and like literally, it's crazy how we don't exist within silence anymore. Really,
correct. I think that's one of the things I kind of sort of meditated on when I was sick, and I was just like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like I went outside to my backyard, dude. And I just started kind of writing things down, almost like a damn poem or something. And then I just started kind of having appreciation for everything, like just the wind, the birds. We started noticing all these things that, because I was working and just doing all these things, like just like a zombie, like I was just like I wasn't taking the time to come and appreciate the fact, like, hey, why is that bug moving? Or it sounds trippy, but it just that week at my house, I was just like on some other stuff, man. I was just like more appreciative of life and everything in it.
It's when you get caught up in life and you're just like kind of going through the motions at that point, and you don't take that time. I think it almost compounds those emotions that you are putting off, because you're not taking any time to yourself. You're just like in the motion of it all. And then I think whenever you do have that moment where you do take that time, it kind of floods in, and it could be a lot. And that's a point I think where either people kind of come to like addiction and stuff, because when they do have that moment, it can be too much for them to handle any of that emotion that they have been putting off, and they don't know how to handle that emotion, so they end up overindulging in all those other things, which ultimately kind of leads to a path that can end up in destruction. So it can be a lot. And I think that goes back to what you were saying with the whole idle hands thing is, when you, it's crazy because I'm not again super religious, but I do wholeheartedly believe when you are serving in the sense like of your community and the people around you, you're giving a piece of yourself, because you are in religion supposed to look at others as if they are you, right? An extension of yourself. You're all children of God. You're all made in His image, and technically, not literally, but technically in the sense, brothers and sisters, right? So when you are helping others and you are extending your hand out to these people and getting involved, then it does leave. That is more, I think, filling than all these other things. And it's kind of hard when you grow up and you look at people that have all these things that you don't have, which is also a sin if you're looking at religion. You're not supposed to covet. Yeah, you're not covet thy neighbor. Yeah. You're not supposed to.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, not
yeah.
Well,
So
after someone's things, including like their
anything. Yeah, you're not supposed to want
like thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
And like circling back to what he said, like it's essential things. It's for like most people would say it's common sense, right? But I mean, I think we're living in a day and age where like, hey, those things aren't common sense anymore.
No, yeah, I was gonna ask a question, but then I answered it before I asked it. Which the question was: do you think that those were basic like understanding levels of like living as a people together in like
in a community,
in a community and humanity, and now we might be so like far past that like level of community because of how like our population level, and also how divisive certain things have like allowed certain people have allowed their things to divide them.
Correct.
And but the answer is like, well, no, we haven't even gotten the basic shit right.
Right.
If we haven't gotten the basic shit right, then obviously we need to maybe still pay attention
Yeah.
to it,
Yeah.
because even though life has gotten more complex, the fucking basic shit is still troubling
For sure.
us.
For sure.
I think the basic shit is something that like Christians definitely struggle with, but I feel like a lot of it comes down to like, I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but like with you will be more interesting, I guess. Like I feel like a lot of it comes down to the whole idea of like Christianity, because like in the Bible, like in the New Testament, Christianity didn't exist. It was like Jesus, and he had like disciples, and I feel like when we step away from being disciples of Jesus and step into being Christians, like you literally lose like that discipline that is associated with being a disciple. And in losing that discipline, you lose everything. Like essentially you just lose everything. So you end up in a place where you have a lot of people who call themselves Christians who are not actually adhering to those commandments. Like and I think this is obvious for everyone. Like obviously if everyone adhered to all those commandments, the world would be a beautiful, perfect place. Like we wouldn't have any problems if nobody was lying, cheating, stealing. So it's like the system itself isn't flawed. It's like it just reflects on the people. People are just flawed,
that's what it is.
Which is what we were stated to be. So it is.
It's an interesting point. I never thought of it that way, but the fact of the matter is, like, the disciples literally were just those that followed Jesus and his teachings because they believed in what he was speaking.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, when they detach themselves from that ideal, that they are technically, if you are a follower of Jesus, you are a disciple in that sense. And by being a disciple, you are supposed to follow those teachings, and I think a lot of people lose sight of that.
There's a lot more personal responsibility.
Exactly.
It feels like a lot. Like it feels like, oh, I'm a disciple. Like, dang, that means I really need to like do something, instead of the like more easy, like I'll just be a Christian. Like
It's the difference between supporting Forrest Gump because you see him on TV and actually running with that motherfucker.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that's why the alternative to that is just it's easier for you just to go and drift off and do bad. You know, so it's like, well, why am I gonna have to deal with all this? You know, why do I have to abide by rules? And it's like, you know, when you're young, you don't really perceive these things as, you know, you're like, well, you know, I'll have time later, right? When you start to realize, like, shoot, time's running out or something, you know, like I feel like time's running out. And it's just
only
like,
goes in one direction.
You know, like let me take hold, let me take stoke of what I'm doing, you know. So, but yeah.
So what, like, now that you're you started this podcast, and you know, I think you said you end up getting like a Christian debater who, you know, is devout in the faith. Real good. That was good. Yeah, you're not on mic. But
Thank God.
yeah, like he's a devout Christian, and he is a master debater. There, I followed you up on that. I followed him up. So like with that being said too, like what I guess are you trying to convey to the listeners? Like what about the word are you like moved about? What are you trying to spread to the people?
This is basically the truth, right? So when you're intertwined with the truth, and it's like you're trying to seek, the word says, "Seek and you shall find." And so that's exactly what I did in 2012. I had questions, and I asked God for answers, and throughout this whole 13-year process, He's been revealing. Now God is like, He's not in a rush. We are, right? Because we're on a limited time frame. We don't know when our last day is gonna be. So, and again, I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner. I am in constant need of God because I can't do it by myself. And it's through that revelation, you know, gradually that you start to learn all these different lessons. And so, for example, I was someone who used to make 100,000 working at the refineries. When I lost that job, dude, I was struggling. And so I ended up literally doing valet for places that I used to go dine at. So to me, it was a humbling experience, but I see why God did that. Because again, I was on this side of the spectrum, and when I got to that side, I was like, oh shoot, dude, like I was never humble to these guys. I was just be like, oh, they're just workers, whatever. But now I'm on this side, like, and it's, you get a whole different perspective. And you're like, hey, these people are struggling just like me. And I'm over here complaining about my situation that is bad, but these guys have it so much worse. I think there was one guy that's actually a good friend. His name is Wilmer. He had just gotten here from Venezuela. He left everything out there, dude, to come here on just a chance, dude. And thank God he's doing pretty good right now. He has his own business, like he's flipping cars and stuff like that. But it's the attitude, it's the mentality of like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna go over there, I'm gonna make it. But I see why those things happen, you know.
Hustler's mentality will take you places, man.
Yeah.
But that's crazy. I mean, I have a buddy from Venezuela as well, and I know exactly how difficult things are down there right now. It's actually fucking crazy. But it's really humbling to see those stories, because it just brings it brings light upon like exactly how much you're taking for granted, and like exactly how much you're not like quote unquote locking in on the things that you're supposed to be doing. But like it gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to do something about it at the same time.
I would say something interesting that I guess I don't know if anyone to add on that, but kind of an interesting deviation is do you have like I guess atheists or like non-believers that do you interact with them at all, and are they giving you like arguments and stuff?
Not yet. I mean, I'd definitely be open to sitting down, and it's like I told everybody that I was speaking about the podcast. I'm like, you know, I want to have people of all walks. I want to have people of all religions and all backgrounds and all, you know, theological, you know, perspectives, because I'm someone who traveled a lot. So I got to see. I was fortunate enough to do that, and so I got to see how other people lived in different countries. And so when I went to Thailand, that was a whole different experience. I almost died there, by the way, too. But and again, I'm here by the grace of God, dude. I am literally here by the grace of God, because there was twice where we almost died, and one time in Bangkok and another time in Phi. Yeah, in Phi Island, and so I can honestly say my life's a miracle, dude. I am here strictly because of the grace of God. Because there were so many times I should have died, but I didn't. I know I've said that in the past, but I can't stress it enough, dude. Like I should not be here, dude.
And I guess another thing, tagging on to what I just said, are there any arguments I guess that you've heard in the wild? Because I guess I listen to a lot of I guess theological content, I guess, or from both sides, because it's just interesting. Like in the same way in which I would watch Fox News, so I know what's going on. Like I listen to what the atheists have to say, I listen to what the believers have to say, I listen to arguments on both sides. So I'm just interested if you've like heard any arguments from like an atheist or non-believer that you didn't know how to like respond to.
Yeah, so not me personally, but I have seen podcasts where for example, like Jordan Peterson went up against Sam Harris, and then Sam Harris kind of in a way kind of, you know, owned him on a lot of things. But again, you're having a crowd, and where I felt like Peterson went wrong was that he started getting in his feels about it, started getting upset about it. You can't do that, dude. Like, you're a professional. Like, you have so much, you know, accolades under your belt. Like, there's no reason for you to get mad, dude.
Yeah.
And so, because he was really trying to prove his point and disprove Sam Harris's point, it's like you can't get mad, dude. And I understand, like, the crowd was kind of edging him on, but I was like, dude, you can't lose your cool, man. Like,
Yeah, I feel like he got cooked. If I remember that, he got cooked on the problem of evil, because that's one of Sam's like favorite arguments, which is basically just the argument that is like, okay, well, if God is real and he's like all loving, then like why does like evil exist, right? That's like the common argument. But I actually do have a very strong counter argument from like the theological side, which is that, you know, let's say that you lived in a world where every time you did a good thing happened, and every time you did a bad thing, bad things happened. In that world, are there good people and bad people? The answer is no, because obviously you would just be incentivized to do good things. And in living in that world, you would know, as someone who lives in that world, that in some way this experience is on rails. You would know, if I do this, I have this sort of control. Whereas in the world that we live in, if you do a good thing, you don't know what will happen. And that is what allows you to be a good person.
See, the thing about like the evil thing that I don't like agree with non-believers on is the like, clearly there's some level of divine intervention, because you see it on every walk of life. Like, as far as like, even if you go to like yin and yang, it's like there's balance in the world. There has to be evil for there to be good. There has to be good days for there to be bad. It's kind of a perception conversation. Like, if you're seeing this as a good day, it's only because you've had worse days than this. And that exists whether you believe in God or not. It's just like, kind of, whether you say it's divine intervention, there's a God that I believe in that made it this way, or if you say that's just the way it is. Realistically, all you're saying is you're agreeing that there is a positive and a negative opposite reaction to everything. And so, like, to call someone out of line for calling that like legitimate evil versus God, or God versus the devil, or whatever words you want to put into the conversation and make it make sense. You already agree with that. You already wake up and agree that makes sense to you. That yin and yang is a symbol you probably tattooed on your body somewhere. But like,
and like I said, I've had conversations with for example, with some Buddhists, like when I was in Thailand, and so I listen. I like to listen. I was someone that used to like talk over people, and I stopped doing that a long time. Because sometimes you just gotta hear people out. You know. And so, like, I've heard this quote before. It says, it's in the mark of an educated person to be able to entertain a thought without fully accepting it. And so, like, I appreciate what you're saying, but I know that I'm pretty solid in my foundation. And so it's like, but, like, I'll listen to you, and I'll sit down and talk. Like, we can talk for sure, why not? I'm not going to be swayed by it. But, yeah, like, I could definitely appreciate other people's perspectives, their ideas, and their religions.
I will piggyback off of Evan in the way that, so I guess for me, again, I don't believe, I guess, in God in the Christian sense, like, because I don't, we look at God for some reason as if God is like us in a way, or like he created us as if he was a human being, which obviously he's not, right? But I guess my argument to that would be that what if this is like the world was created by something, but there isn't really like a rhyme or reason in the sense that that being is watching over us. Like, what if they created it, but there's just a natural rhythm to the life that we live, in which they whatever that being is created that, and that we are just living within that realm of being, right?
Well, I guess
we just, because the thing is we live in a chaotic world, because the natural order of life, how we view it, would be chaotic because we try to create order in life. But the thing is, there is no, like, I guess there is a natural order in the sense that, like, if you look at the like nature in the animal kingdom, right? There's prey, there's predators, there's survival and things you need to do in order to survive, especially according to nature. Like, whatever, environment you're living in, you kind of have to adapt and evolve accordingly.
Well, I guess I would ask for one clarification. So, I mean, there's an argument. This is called the first mover argument. Kind of what you're describing is like an argument for God, typically. But I see what you're saying. So, but I would say, are you kind of describing an instance where there's like an actor who initiates the world but is not a part of it, or are you saying there's like it's an instance where an actor initiates the world, is a part of it, but is like has no effect on it?
Like, I'm saying, because for me personally, I do believe something created us, right? I don't believe that we just poof, we're here, right? And the thing is, I also believe like microcosm is a product of the macrocosm, right? Like, our macrocosm is a product of the
I will say it's a trippy spiral staircase if you don't.
Because like because the thing is, like, as you go further down, we're all a product of this, like, similar, right? The way that birth works or like creation works, it goes up and down, in a similar fashion. So I do believe something created us, but I think the fact of the matter is that being that created us might not necessarily actually be taking action in the process in which that we're living. And I guess what I was going to go off when I said I was going to piggyback off him is, with that being said, like, what would be a strong argument for you in trying to express like Christianity or the existence of God and the existence of God in our lives? Like, what brought you to a point where you're like, I know that God exists, and if someone was like, there's no way, I don't believe in it at all, how would you kind of explain that and try to bring them to a point where they could maybe even entertain the idea that there's an existence of a God?
I'd say testimonies is one of the most important things that Christians have to come to the faith in. And so I can use my own testimony, which was when I was going to die, and I could use several other ones where I felt like I'm like, this is like, I don't see any way out of this. And something, like you said, it was a cause and effect. Like, it just, I pray to God, and I received, I got delivered from these things in such a supernatural way that I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't understand it. And somebody might say, like, it could have been by chance, but it's like, I'd like to think that it wasn't. I'd like to think that everything's perfectly aligned in our lives to where it's like, I mean, because I ran away from God for a long time. I mean, I didn't want to do it. Even the podcast, I didn't want to do it. I was just like, nah. But it just kept, like, the severity, and again, I don't want to make it sound like God is a cosmic buzzkill. I've heard this before, because he's not. But he'll give you up to your own free will. And I think in a way he does. He does step back and he's like, all right, cool. You go ahead and do you. But it gets to a point where it's like, all right, you because you're ending yourself, because you're destroying yourself, now I gotta step in because I love you. I don't want to destroy you. Or I don't want to allow yourself to destroy yourself. And so that's when like the reprimands come, like, oh shoot, okay. And so it just comes in such a supernatural way, dude, that like I can't even sit here and explain. Like, I can explain my own experience, and but I can't sit here and explain to other people. And that's crazy. Like I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't understand it. I was just like, but it's a reassurance that I'm not the only one. Like, hey, you thought you were gonna die too, and then somehow you didn't, and you're here, and we have a similar belief, like our essence, yeah. And so,
Yes, I think like honestly for me, I have very difficult struggles with like pertaining to any religion. It like actually across the board. I think there's a lot of teachings from a lot of different religions that I've studied that I do actually believe in, and there's a it like you said, I believe there is like a creator to all of this. Because the thing that science won't admit is that all of science exists with just one mirror, and that's all of this coming from the ballpoint of a fucking pen. Like I don't know what you can say the catalyst of the Big Bang Theory
That's
is,
even
but like
debated,
let's
I will
just
say.
talk about it. Like,
I will say even the Big Bang Theory is not even like.
so how that so
Yeah,
what
that even
happened?
means,
Like
like,
what made it explode? What made it like what happened before that? Like
they haven't really reached a consensus with the whole
like that
Big Bang
that question with science is the same question with like people trying to disprove God with trying to say, okay, well, who created God? It's like, all right, well, you're saying things that we have established that we don't know. But like the point is that I think for me, I pertain to a lot of different teachings, and I do like the community aspect of religion and how like whether or not like we all believe the exact same thing, we have similar beliefs to where we can come together and make sure everyone's fed, make sure everyone's taken care of, housed, and all these different things that we can do under the aspect of trying to serve God. And that I fuck with heavily.
yeah,
It's just so much of I think for me that I don't enjoy about like certain stories and teachings in within these religions that makes me have a like distasteful like look towards
for
religion
sure.
as a whole, if that makes
So
sense.
I think, and again, you stated it very well. Like at the end of the day, we're all here on this earth. We all have to try to coexist and survive basically. And so, why not, right? It's like let's try to get along no matter what walks of life you come from. And so I think for me, and again, I was somebody I used to be super judgmental and stuff like that. But again, through trials and tribulations, like I've learned to kind of be more accepting of other people. Uh, Again, maybe not because I wanted to, but more because I was like forced to. But like again, it's a humbling experience, and every scenario of life, every season, there's something different, man. And it's like you might have your high seasons where you're doing really good, and then hey, you know what? Something tragic happens, man. And I think like for example in the Old Testament, the book of Job, and I don't know if you are familiar with the book of Job, but basically he's someone that gets afflicted. And so this is one of the things that a lot of Christian people shy away from, and I don't understand why, but affliction is suffering, and affliction is a thing. Like, everybody wants to talk about success and the accolades, and you can reach this. No, talk about sufferings. You know what I mean? Like this thing is real. People go through it every single day. And so he says it like there's a verse in the book of Job where he says why is there no intercessor between man and God? And so it's almost like a foreshadowing of Jesus if you actually like delve into it. And so I thought that was pretty fascinating because again, the book of Job sort of speaks of it. He's like he yearns for it, like he like where's that communion between man and God? There wasn't one for a long time. And so like when Jesus came, it's again the fulfillment of the law, and that connection was finally made. Um, and so I think that's pretty cool in my eyes.
And I guess I would say as a more, I guess, technical counter argument to what Dandy was saying, as far as like the thing with religion. I mean, first of all, I would say the problem that you're going to continuously run into is back with when I was talking about the disciples and the Christians, because you have a lot of people. I mean, case in point, our president currently who claim to be Christian, but they are not following any of the like. So you have a lot of people who would kind of scare you away from like the not the religion, but from the book, like from the word
Correct.
itself. And I feel like if you actually like read the word, which is what all of these different aspects of spirituality were based around, you would resonate with it because this is a lot of core truths about like it's just living a good life, being successful, and the thing that happens in that resignation is that you realize when you're resonating with it, like, oh, like I was meant to read this, like this information has been like distilled from in some way, in some manner for me in 2025 to read it, and it has like a combination of like human and somehow like otherworldly knowledge, like for example, like the Bible specifically, although there's good things in a lot of different spiritual texts, like the Bible specifically, like the book of Genesis, like my favorite book, like the creation of the universe actually goes like in scientific order, right? Like it's like, and what's interesting is it actually says that it doesn't even say that God in Genesis created the universe. It says that God gathered the things. Like it starts off and there are already things. It says God gathered the things and he arranged them. And then first there was light. Obviously, like we know that there's darkness and there's light. And then it goes down in order of creation that is still accurate today. And it's like, how in the world would people 2,000 years ago even have a perception? Like, why wouldn't they just get everything completely out of order?
That's fair.
And
Like,
then
how were they able
And
to?
then this idea.
Argument against that.
Well, there's several counter arguments and arguments. This is the thing people have been
I was
debating
just
for
saying,
thousands of years.
fucking much longer than 2,000 years ago, people were smart enough to fucking align pyramids with the stars and fucking
Well,
shit like that. Like, I mean, like, not to say
that's another thing that's completely unexplained in my
what
opinion.
I'm trying to say is
Like,
whether or
Yeah.
not God intervened then too. My point is that like science and mathematics has kind of like
Yeah, it
been
was
around
definitely
for a
important.
very
Yeah.
long time.
Well, I would say, I
It
guess,
devolved before it evolved again. pretty much.
I guess I would say like I kind of see it as like, I think I've talked about it before on this podcast. You probably haven't heard of this before, but this thing called the Baha'i faith. It's like the world's like newest religion, and it's kind of what I kind of
they're still
resonate.
making them.
Yeah, they're still making them. The prophet for it, I want to say he was alive in like the 1800s, right? 1800s. I think he died kind of towards the end of the 1900s, and well, it's funny you say Abraham, because the Baha'i faith is basically a unification of all the Abrahamic religions. It's basically a unification of all the Abrahamic religions, and the reason why I really resonated with it is because the prophet, when he was basically writing the scriptures for this faith, he acknowledged Jesus as the Son of God, Muhammad, Moses, right? All the Abrahamic religions, and he basically says that the universe will continuously manifest itself in an individual in order to update the information, because the information will just inevitably become diluted and distilled over time.
I think that.
Well, I say all that to kind of go at what Dandy is saying, where you're if you think about it as one individual religion, I think you will find flaws. But if you more so think about it as the source manifesting itself at different points in times, at different levels, maybe Jesus being like the highest, most purest form of manifestation, because he just appears in so many other religions. Like, why are they acknowledging this guy? Like, doesn't like you would think they wouldn't if you wanted to find a religion. Like, why would Muhammad? You know, these types of things. Like, I think that's where and even to this day, you still have like the world is basically functioning on a.
Not to divert the
religious-
conversation to like a different topic, but it's kind of like when like they say like UFO sightings happened, or like it started happening mainly around like whenever nuclear bombs were getting like created and shit like that. It's like almost whenever people are destroying themselves or people around them, does an update come, and whether that be like another level of that quote unquote update. It's just one of those things where it's like, if you look back at these different time frames when these like prophets were existing within, like what was going on around them that forced that deity to push this into the like matrix, basically.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is that I know people say science and religion don't go together, but I would disagree a lot. I would say that essentially science proves that everything is connected to a certain degree, and with quantum physics recently, you know, we're kind of seeing that there's a realm beyond the one that we can see that we interact with constantly. We're constantly interacting with a realm that exists pretty much parallel to ours that we can't see, but we do take effect on, and it takes effect on us. And whether it's like our thoughts, and at the molecular level too. And I think it's like kind of crazy because we all are connected on a level that we can't see, right? And we don't necessarily know what that means because we're not able to really view that until you get to a certain point. And I think, if you were to relate that to religious, terms, it's kind of, like once you reach that certain point, right, then you kind of, I don't know what term, you would use in this, transcend, elevate, whatever you want to call it, to this next realm of being. And you won't, until you kind of reach that point, you'll never be able to understand what that is until you've kind of evolved to that point. And for like science purposes, it is crazy because we try to act like that's not a real thing. But the thing is, we just don't understand it. So we're denying that in which we don't fully understand, I guess.
Well, I would think
Which is that's just like something, in life we like to deny those that we don't think we don't
the
understand.
funny thing even about science is that we're still not at the point where if you kept asking why, someone would be able to answer you past like 5 or 6 whys. Like eventually you would get to the point to where scientists are even today still like, I don't know.
Because someone wrote that shit down. That's why.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, I don't know. Well, when it comes to like what we know about the quantum realm and these, like what we know about the fundamental material of reality that a lot of atheists like find so much solace in is still mostly guesswork. Like we understand like that it's working a certain way. We have no idea why it's doing that.
Truthfully, but it does bring about like the level of barrier of understanding of your like world around you, basically, where it's like quantum theory is extremely interesting to me because to me it shows that whenever something changes once it's being measured, it goes to show that it's like, well, if we're always being perceived, then are we even really being ourselves? If we're always changing whenever we're being measured, as like on a quantum level to a certain degree, like when are you yourself?
We are more than just that. I guess that would go to prove the point that we are more than just our physical form, right?
Sure.
And more than what we are seen as. Because if we're constantly changing by being perceived, then there has to be something more than which is a physical form.
I've heard this term before where it says that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and
Right.
I mean, I couldn't explain it any better than that.
It is that, and it's kind of. I think whenever you talk about like religion, it brings that spiritual experience to almost like put things in a box. Not entirely, but only because we exist within this place and time where there are multiple different religions and multiple different ways to do things. And so you have to look at it as like, okay, well, what line of sight do I most align with? If is it Christianity? Is it Judaism? Is it whatever the conversation is am I putting myself into a box by stepping onto this path
Correct.
versus existing as myself and trying to perceive life in that
Yeah,
way?
I think in the simplest form or in the most practical form, it's like take religion out of the equation. Like just aim for a relationship with God, and that's it. And through doing that, you'll start to receive. You'll start to learn like what the actual.
And
I think-
something that's just to tag on to this real quick. I don't know if you've like looked into like the original Hebrew translation of the Old Testament because it's kind of quite different from the most new translations. But something that's interesting, I think I've talked about it on the pod before, but it'll be interesting to you is that Yahweh, which is like the Hebrew word for God, is actually the same word for air, and it's actually the same word for breath. So it's like this when you were saying that like we're spiritual beings having like this physical body, like the Hebrew Old Testament reads a whole lot differently because they basically had to just make a lot of interpretations. But if you read the old scripture, it's kind of intuiting that like the breathing, like the experience of being alive is in a sense the same experience as God. Like in breathing, that is experiencing God. Like you're experiencing that you're alive. And then that's your experience of being a spirit. Like it's all the same thing. The breath, the air, the sky, like the atmosphere that we live in, God, they literally have the same word for all of it. It's just it's a weird thing to try to translate because it doesn't hit the same. But if you could think about it being the same word, to breathe as God, it's like in the connection between the two when reading the Bible, it kind of changes your perspective on like what people mean, I guess, when they're talking about like ancient spirituality and these types of things of that nature.
Yeah, I think even before, like, I think they had the issue of different religions before, which you had that Babylonian Empire, you had the Persian Empire and stuff like that, and so, which actually it's fascinating because they are mentioned, like in the Book of Chronicles and the Book of Kings, when the Prince of Persia came against the Israelites, and it's pretty. I forgot his name. I can't remember it, but it was a Persian king, and so
Jake Gyllenhaal, Prince of Persia.
it could have been. It could have been.
Persian King Darius.
Every
sorry,
time
not
I'm like, he's gonna say
yeah,
something
the
serious.
king of Assyria. Yeah, I want to.
King Darius.
King King Darius did come after. That's the Babylonian king, but yeah. So the king of Assyria came upon against Hezekiah, which was a ruler in Israel at the time, and they were outnumbered. They were gonna lose like any practical way. And he even told him, he's like, just surrender, basically. So in the simplest form, I'm trying to explain it.
Yeah.
He like, just surrender. You're gonna lose. Like, you're outnumbered. You're outwitted. Like, just lose. Like, there's no God that you can call upon that's gonna help you. Like, all these other gods, they fell. Look at them. Like, they're part of our empire now. So might as well just basically just give up. And he's like, no. He's like, your God can't save you. And he consulted with God. He's like, hey, God, this is what's going on. And we're in a tight situation right now. Like, please deliver us from this. And it says the angel of the Lord came down on one of those nights and literally slaughtered. I think it was, I can't remember if it was like 2,000 or 200,000 soldiers or something. Like, I can't remember the exact number, but he did away with the whole army. And then so the king of Assyria had to go back to his kingdom, and his own sons are the ones that slayed him. So like, his great empire fell in less than a night, and then he was killed by his own children when he went back because he had failed. So I thought that was one of the most notable scriptures. I'm like, dude, like, this is crazy. You know what I mean? And apparently there is historical evidence, but obviously in Assyria, like, they don't have, but in Hebraic manuscripts there is evidence of this. But of course they didn't want to. They were so ashamed of it that, like, this isn't gonna go down in history. Like, this was bad. And we can't explain it. So if y'all dig into that, it's pretty fascinating.
It is pretty crazy. What I was gonna say earlier too is that, like, I think a good example of kind of God being present in those moments or just in our lives is that I think the more material items you get, the more greedy you get, the more you're trying to achieve more, you kind of stray further from God, and that's why I think you could see, 'cause it's weird too, because in our society we look down on homeless people, right? We give up on these people because we're like, these aren't functioning members of society. But everyone has a story. We don't know what's going on in anyone's. It's kind of like everyone has their own humbling experience. We don't know their relationship with God. We don't know what. In that sense, we don't know what God's plan is for this person and where they can turn around. I mean, a good example. I mean, it's a fake movie, but a good example would be Pursuit of Happiness. Will Smith, right? Great movie. It was inspired by a true story.
It's a real story.
It was inspired by a true story. Even better, honestly, great example. But yes. So, but we don't know anyone's circumstances in that sense. And the thing is, in those moments, those people find success in a way you could never describe to someone else, right? Because these people don't have anything left other than that relationship with God. They never lose faith, right? So they're able to conquer. Whereas there's people who have quote unquote it all, but their life is crumbling, right? And you're like, how could this be? And it really is one of those things where, again, I'm a believer, like, if you really do serve, right, again, your community, the people around you, you really do give out, love in all aspects, regardless of whatever their religion is, regardless of whatever their race is, regardless of whatever their financial situation is. If you really are extending your hand to these people, then you will see those quote unquote miracles or examples that you might not be able to explain. And again, I get you, because it is hard, because there are things you could call it coincidence, you call it a chance, some people call them miracles, but there are things where it's almost, too coincidental,
Yeah.
where it's like, well, how it's crazy. Like we had our friend Chris on the podcast. He actually had almost died also, crazy enough. Like he was moving furniture and like he stepped the wrong way, I think off a curb.
This motherfucker said he was. What did he say? He said something decapitated. He said like.
No, it's internal decapitation. So
Oh,
basic,
wow.
basically,
I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
yeah, his vertebrae it almost fully detached from his neck inside. So it's not like
Wow.
externally where your head's cut off, but like internally, like his vertebrae was almost
He stepped backwards and this happened.
what?
He stepped back. He stepped.
He
back-
stepped off like a curb, and like the thing he tripped, and it's like he was holding something heavy,
Yeah.
and it basically fell on him,
Wow.
Ooh.
and it pretty much almost killed him. He had to go to the hospital. So yeah, Crush said though, like he'll never be able to work out again. He's like you were like one inch, like less than an inch, really, like centimeters away from literally just chopping
Yeah.
your whole shit off.
Wow.
The curse of God.
Yeah, and so like, it's crazy. He's now like a physical trainer and stuff like that,
Wow.
and he was training somebody, and one of like it's crazy enough, like one of the people he ended up training was like the person whose house that was,
Mm.
like one of his trainees because he came back and he got really into fitness and stuff after that happened, right? Because he's like, I'm not gonna let this get me down. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna be
good.
stronger.
Good.
And then yeah, one of the people he ended up training in like from day to day is the person whose house he
Oh,
was
wow.
at that day when that happened.
That's
And they ended up being
fascinating,
able to
man.
share a story and share a moment. I
That's-
think she like helped him out with something
Wow.
at that point too. But
That level of synchronicity.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
It-
like it's unexplainable,
yeah,
and you could be like
It's
coincidence,
called
but
union synchronicity. I've heard Peterson talk about this, and it's real. It's real. Like it's without a doubt, it's real. And you're right. Money does not equate to happiness, and I've had it. It's nice, it's comfort, but it does not equate happiness. It's like your house. You can have a house, but not a home. You can buy a nice Rolex, but you can't buy time. And I've heard all these things that may sound cliche, but they're real. It's true.
And if you guys want to follow C Mitch, here's his Instagram. This is our boy. He is a inspiration. I will pull it up. This is his Instagram. He is a physical trainer. Hit him up. He will get you right. I will pull it up 1
Nice.
second.
it's the Anointed Men Podcast. We'll pull that up too.
Yeah, and it's kind of. I want to circle back to the homeless thing because I think about 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, I met a homeless guy when I was working with a water company, and I've told this story before, but I'll say it again. And just random guy. We're on Tidwell over there near Westlake, Houston, and I worked for the water company as a service tech at the time, and he kind of came over and he was just kind of seeing what was going on because there was like a big old water main break and it flooded the whole street. And everybody with the company, like the third party company and us, they're like, oh, get away, like go away. And I'm like, dude, like you don't even know what he that's the one. You don't even know what he wants, and you're like just shooing him away, like just listen, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, yeah, how can I help you? Like, oh no, I just want to come see what was going on. Like I used to work the pipeline and just small talk, And so I'm like, yeah, there was a main break, and we got to talking, and then I asked him, I'm like, are you hungry by any chance? He like, yeah, I am, and so I had some pizza in the truck. I'm like, just go ahead and take it, man. Like, I don't mind. And so that whole ordeal, and then he told me he was a believer too, and so that whole ordeal led to a 2-year friendship, where he literally lived off on at a tree house on the side of off the side of Tidwell. Very dangerous neighborhood, by the way. And so, and I was just like, I helped him out, and I just felt like it was my duty to do so. Not just because I'm Christian, but because it's the right thing to do. I'm like, if God brought this person to my life, why would I not? And I have the means to do so. And he ended up passing away from heart failure, dude, like probably like a year and a half ago. So this was around the same time that it was 2 months before my friend Ivan passed away. And so that, I'm having to deal with all that, but at the same time, it's like, dude, I'm glad I met him, because it's like we shared that essence of like, hey, you're a believer, I'm a believer, I helped you out. And I still remember the last message, he sent me a voice message, like I couldn't make out what he was saying at all. And I'm just like, dude, what hospital are you at? Like, I'll go, because he didn't have nobody. Like his family was somewhere up north, and his kids didn't tend to him. His wife had left him. He was a war vet, served in Vietnam. And so it sucks, man. It sucks that hey, our guys that went out and served are having to be in these situations. You think there'd be more networking for them, more just resources for them, and there's not, man.
Agreed.
So it's like you go, and he told me, he's like, I went out and I served because I love my country. He's like, but I came back and my country couldn't serve me, and it's like I'm just like, damn, dude, like, and he struggled with a lot of like PTSDs and night terrors, night sweats. I'm like, dude, I don't know how to help you, bro. Like, I just outside of praying for you and then just trying to help you with what I can. Like, I don't know how else to help you, brother. Like, and it just sucked, that hey, you do all this for your country, and then it's just like you end up living in a treehouse, and it's just like, damn, dude. But I'm thankful. I'm thankful. I'm grateful for his friendship and for the little bit of time that we got to, be friends.
And he, it's in that moment too. Like he wasn't any less of a person
Absolutely not.
because he was homeless. Like he still was a human being that you were able to still, talk with. He just had his own struggles that life gave him, and it sucks because we like to view it as, well, I was able to get my stuff together, regardless of whatever happened. But everyone's story is different. Like he went through his own struggles, and unfortunately, maybe he just wasn't able to rise to the occasion and tackle the struggles that came his way. And adversity is different for everyone. It's hard, and you could put two people in the exact same situation. Doesn't mean that they're going to handle it in the exact same way, right? So not everyone's going to be able to handle the same amount of adversity as another person will be able to. And we like to look at people who can't tackle it as failures when we should really be reaching out a hand and seeing what we can help with.
And you see that in religion, you see that with economical statuses.
I was gonna say, it kind of reverts back to what you were saying about Job.
Yeah.
Realistically, I mean, that's like the suffering that you see in that story to a certain degree.
And people, again, like you said, people would maybe walk by him, frown upon him, but I'm like, dude, this guy's a stand-up guy. Like you don't know him,
right?
So why are you judging? And so I don't know. Like it's just one of those things where it's like you see that in religion, people that think they're holier than thou. Can't stand that, dude. I abhor that, dude.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with economical status. It's like when I worked at the Valet, like I'd have very rich people pull up in their Ferraris or whatever, and they had this just pretentious attitude where it's like, oh, you gotta serve me and you gotta do. I'm like, dude, I don't have to do anything. Like I don't, I really essentially I didn't need the job, but I could have walked off at any point. Like I was like, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Right.
But at the same time, and then you'd have those people that showed up and were real humble. Same situation. They put up in a Ferrari too, real humble. Hey, how are y'all doing? Tip very well. And those were the people. Like I looked back and I looked at my coworker David. I'm like, you want to hear something, David? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, you see these two guys that showed up today? Like one was very humble and just real cool and easy to get along with. And you had the other guy, which was an asshole. And he's like, you strip away the money from them, what's left? Like you have a really good stand-up guy and you have a POS on the other side.
Right.
So it's like money is just it's a facade, man. It's
a
just
monetary.
a front, dude.
It's a value
But
point.
it's like essentially at the core, what are you? Who are you? And that's what's gonna emanate, man. When you
what do you stand
people,
for? Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because we live now in a time where it seems like a little bit of what Evan was talking about earlier about like once you remove that level of being a quote unquote disciple for the thing that you believe in, it's like you almost quote unquote don't believe in it because you're not acting in that way. You're not pushing that like agenda forward. You're not being the person that you atone to believing that you should be. And whether you are some of the time and to your friends and your family, but if you're not doing that to guys that are coming up to a job site or people that are parking your car for you, then what are you doing? Why do you and we've talked about this recently about like selective belief, selective grief, selective faith in certain things. And it's interesting how many people have a bar that they're not willing to go beyond.
Sure.
Well, it's like, well, I don't believe that should exist. It's like, well, it's existing, and you only started caring about this.
I mean, if you look at the Gospels, I mean, it just you had the Sadducees and the Pharisees that were well versed in the law, And so outwardly, they were like, they were, they were like, hey, the it thing, right? But they didn't have God in their hearts because the Messiah came and they didn't realize it was him. Had they had a different heart, their heart posture was different, they would have known. They would have known, like, hey, this is the Son of God, but we can't see it. That's why he called them brood of vipers, because he's like, outwardly you seem like you're religious and all this, but inwardly, like, you're dead. Basically, he told them like that. So he was pretty like, when it came to them, he didn't. And this is another thing. He, God hates sin. Jesus hated the sin, but he loves the sinner. So he hates that they're in sin, but he still loves them. So that's crazy to kind of grasp that. Like, the first time I ever heard that, I was like, how do you do both? And, interchangeably, like, or at the same time. Like, that's hard to love somebody but hate their sin. Like, how does that even work? Like, when I first heard it, I was like, that's kind of crazy to me. You know what I mean? Like, but I mean, you know, Jesus did it. You know?
Kind of like the see with your heart, and you'll never, go wrong. If you're like looking through things through, love, then you'll never be steered wrong.
Sure.
Or yeah, because you'll be able to see through whatever that. But it's again,
Yeah.
like they were so rooted in their own ways that they weren't able to
Yeah.
see Jesus for who he was.
And I think God gives us an ability to discern. It says, test the spirits to see if they're from God. And I've had individuals that, they talk, but they don't live by it. Like you said, it's just like, what really are you, And again, I'll put myself out there. I'll raise my hand. Like, I've been that person before, and I was hypocrite. And who knows, maybe I'm still being a hypocrite, right? So it's one of those things, man, where you constantly got to kind of scan your heart and just realize, like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm messing up and I'm bringing this to God. I'm laying it out on the table. This is who I am. I know nobody else will accept this or accept me for who I am, but God will, because it's like, you'll revert, you'll change. It's like, I don't think I've ever seen someone come to Christ and just, unless they don't want to, right? Because there's always free will, right? And I think that's the greatest gift that God gave us, is free will, to be able to make a decision, and either follow through with it or not. But everything that we do is going to be held accountable, on the day of judgment, you know. And those that we know, we're going to be judged on a different scale. So I think there's sins. The word says that there's sins for the things that we do, and the sins for the things that we didn't. And so that's kind of, for me as a believer, that's frightening, dude, because it's like the people that I felt, inherently that I should have talked to, I didn't. And so, like, there's always like this inwardly conviction of, like, hey, you should go talk to that person. But more often than none, I haven't. But the times that I have, dude, like, it's crazy. Like, these people are like, this is exactly what I need. I'm like, that's crazy, you know? So,
Yeah. Thought I was gonna say more. I mean, honestly, yeah. I feel like, man, that's like really good to hear. I guess you've made like quite the journey. I would say, like, I guess, kind of crazy to come in the fourth quarter to kind of play the other side a little bit. But honestly, I would say my most confusing thing, because like for me personally, my dad's a pastor, my mom is very spiritual. Like, my whole entire family, both sides, super spiritual. It's always been super easy and obvious for me. So I will say, I guess, as an aside to the non-believers, that like part of me is just like, I just feel bad for them in a way. Not necessarily non-believers. I would say like atheists. I would say agnostic who are like spiritual is like, you're cool. But like, if you're like atheist, like, as in the sense of where you adamantly believe that there's like nothing beyond what science can explain, then in that sense, in that case, like, I feel sorry for those people.
I think
Honestly.
that is not. I don't think there's anything wrong with. I think discerning information in your like human experience and trying to put like everything in a box and put yourself in that box. But I do think that there is something very extremely limiting about that, and I do also atone that to both believers and non-believers, in the way that it's like, don't know. Maybe there will be a day, but so far at least I have pretty much looked at things. It's like I might always be agnostic because, like I said earlier, there's a lot of different religions that I pull certain teachings from that I do atone to, and I am very spiritual, but it's just not to the point where it's like I'm gonna be there on Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, dude, like I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Alan Watts, but I can appreciate a lot of his content, man. Still listen to him, and so it's definitely things to think about, and it's like I appreciate some of the teachings that he has. But again, it's just like I'm pretty well founded on my belief, but it doesn't mean I won't listen to him. Like some of this stuff, it has a lot of good content, good essence in it. So
But I think that goes back to just like everyone has their own relationship with God in the way that they might not even call it God in the same sense that someone else calls it with God, but they might still speak to whatever it
Yeah.
is, or they go home at night and they have a belief that there's a connection to something, and they might like find solace in that, and still follow like in the path of that God has laid out before us, but just in a different context.
For
Which I think more or less is, I think God would look at that and still kind of accept that. And people are like, well, you have to accept Jesus. I mean, but he does. If you do truly believe in Christianity, you would know that he gives you that opportunity
yeah,
come in the end. He gives you that one more opportunity at the final day, and be like, you can accept me and still have the chance
for sure.
at judgment. At least that chance at judgment.
And
to get into.
I think it might even come before that. Like I think sometimes we might not perceive it. Whether like again, I used to like my parents would be like, "Oh no, don't answer those Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever." I think God can use anybody, whether they're a Jehovah's Witness or whatever to send a message. And so like I think missionaries, I give them props, man, for what they do. Like who gets up and leaves their home and starts preaching the gospel in like some third world country. Like mad props to them, man. I don't know if I'd be able to do that.
I'm with you on that. I've always looked at that as like a very noble thing, even if I don't like fully believe in things that they're preaching or believing in. It's always been one of those things where it's like you put all your shit to the side. You put your whole life, your family, your hobbies, your wants, your needs, all the things that you could have ever like put on a dream board for yourself as a kid. You put all that shit to the side, and you're just trying to give back to other people.
It's a selfless action, man.
It's crazy because it's not just selfless, but it's like it's like directionless at first until you get there, and it's almost like immediate.
Sure.
From what I've understood from like learning about
I
it,
think there was
actually
a kid, a Christian kid. I think he was Asian that went and tried to preach the gospel over there at some. I can't remember the island. It was somewhere near India.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And he ended up, I think, from what they assume,
It was an uncontacted tribe.
yeah, and they had never made. I think once, right? I think maybe years back.
He had went once before, and then he came back. But they told him not to. Well, I say told him, but they expressed their aggression.
Yeah.
They had like shot arrows at him or something.
And so he went back, and he just never came back home. So like stuff like that, that's crazy,
I would say just to go back a little bit because I have the idea of the psychedelic spiritualism. There is actually quite a bit of evidence to suggest that a lot of early, not just Christianity, but early spirituality in general was based around psychedelic rituals. They found evidence of Rome, like they found things still with the chalices in the chamber of like ancient psychedelics that they were using. It ironically wasn't into more modern history that psychedelics and drugs in general started getting this negative connotation that kind of disconnected them from the spiritual experience.
I was gonna say, as a growing up Catholic, I always looked at the the turning the bread into the body the wine into the blood, and then the giving of the not the
I forgot what it's
right?
called, but
The
communion.
Is it communion?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But that I've always looked at that as like a ritualistic thing that seemed to have come from passing like some cup around to like drink the blood of Christ. But it's like once you look into like some historical context of like what they were putting in those cups, it's like this was purely a psychedelic ritual to a certain degree that we've extrapolated and then like kind of taken basically interchanging
Yeah.
component out.
I think some people would probably use that to diminish it, but me personally, I would just say like obviously psychedelics exist.
Yeah.
Like there's no way, there's nothing that you can do in this reality to like truly escape from this reality. So whatever psychedelic that people were using, if like people will say like something like, oh well, obviously they were just like quote unquote hallucinating, like if they took some psychedelics to like experience something, where it's just like a counter argument is, I mean, well, whatever the thing that they saw allegedly, if it was real, would have put that psychedelic there for them to see it.
I've looked
Like-
at it like as if that was a psychedelic that was used in those rituals, then are you even performing the ritual when you go to church? Because if those components aren't involved, then aren't you just
That's
playing
actually a good
charades on the
Yeah.
thing that you're supposed to be doing? Not to say that we should be giving kids drugs. What I'm saying is that we should look at this as like are we actually performing the taking of the blood and the taking of the
Yeah.
bread, or has this been so watered down to meet our society's standards that it's no longer actually performing that thing?
Correct.
I was gonna say that also in a lot of, I mean, a lot of those earlier civilizations, like especially natives, you know, I mean, they don't give kids that stuff. They wait till like they're a certain age and like this is a rite of it's a rite of passage for a lot of
Yeah,
them
yeah.
too. So they're not like, you're 6 years old. Here's some drugs. They're like, you're rite of passage. They give them because there were certain tribes at one point they would give it to you. You would roam into the desert and come back a man essentially. Like if you're like a boy, so you go and you'd have to survive in the desert for a certain period of time, and then you'd come back. And basically, it was a symbolism for fighting your demons,
Okay.
right? You're fighting yourself. You're figuring out who you are, and you come back learning more and knowing more about yourself. So, and in those instances, I mean, obviously they were doing peyote because it's a cactus, and you know, in a lot of like Midwestern areas in America, it's pretty much primarily stuff like cactus and shit
Okay.
like that. Like if you go to in the desert, so they were taking peyote cactus and drinking the juice of the cactus, which then would cause hallucinations, which is crazy because you're sending off like probably I don't know. I mean, could you look that up? What age they would usually send him? I want to say it's like 13 years old.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I was gonna say you're talking about like kids. I was like, yeah, they start communion at fucking 12 and 13. So that's my point. Yeah, it's like it is kids. I mean, whether you say it's no, he's a man now. He's had his bar mitzvah. Fuck you. That's a child. Fuck you.
Well,
Gotta
I
start
do
'em
say
young.
this. I think there's a difference between the wine we have now and the wine that they had before. I think the wine that they had before, if I'm not mistaken, like it wasn't fermented. It was like fresh wine, and so when you have fresh wine, it's just basically grape juice. If I'm correct though. So there was a difference between that, I believe.
Than what it is now, and I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think
I mean, is that true though? Because I feel like
I think they
man,
fermented fruits.
There's
at
a
that point.
problem. The problem with the Catholic Church, I would say, and honestly, what they kind of started with the rest of Christianity is they just started adding arbitrary rules. Like, for example, if you're like a certain level within the Catholic Church, you're supposed to be like abstinent. That's like completely arbitrary. Like Peter was like married. Like like the disciples. Some of the disciples, for lack of a better way of saying this, were fucking like canonically.
I mean, to be
Like,
to be fair,
like, they just arbitrarily added a rule.
yeah, we also tried to deny it. I'm not saying he had sex with her, but there was definitely probably some kind of emotional relationship between Jesus and Mary.
Yeah, apparently there's been, there's been that argument that he kissed her he would kiss her on the mouth, but I don't know if that was like again, I don't want to meddle into that because again, I don't know the traditions,
Well, speaking of disciples fucking, Judas fucked us all.
But
But you could say Adam did,
Yeah.
like literally.
Adam was
First
the
man.
original, the OG. He was the OG. He was.
The unk sin.
He's like, let me tell you guys a thing or two. Let me put y'all on game real quick. It's not gonna end well. That's what he was gonna tell us anything. I do want to know. I will I do that. The one thing that also maybe y'all can tell me because I feel like y'all probably have more information on it than I do. Is there any point in time that's accounted between like Adam and Eve and their children to the point where civilization started with more human beings?
Yeah. In is it Deuteronomy? In the second book of the Bible, it's literally just a list of names. It just goes Adam, and then it just goes
the
down
whole genealogy.
a whole list of genealogy.
But at what point was there other people created or
Yeah, there had
You
to
know,
be.
I think
Like,
the question is like are you asking about just? Yeah, okay. So you're asking about incest, pretty much. Like
So
at what level did they just throw in some different Adams and
Yeah.
Eves so that we're not just fucking our brothers and sisters?
I'm genuinely curious because there's just a point in the Bible where it kind of goes from just their family and they're like now there's a bunch of people. So I'm
Well,
like, what?
it's just basically.
I don't know
Deuteronomy.
enough, so I don't
yeah,
know if there's
yeah.
it's
No,
explained somewhere.
like
You know
for
what I mean?
example, Lot. After Sodom and Gomorrah gets destroyed, or is being destroyed through fire, God tells Lot and his family like, all right, y'all can go ahead and leave. He's like, but he tells them don't look back, and the wife looks back and it's a pillar of salt, and so he doesn't have a wife after that. And so what it says is that he gets drunk one night, and obviously the daughters they want to get pregnant, they want to have children, and so they end up sleeping with Lot. Again, I can't I'm not at the level or the knowledge of discernment to be able to explain that to y'all, but it did happen. So that was incest in a sense. So I'm not
Okay.
gonna shy away from it. It did happen. It's in the Bible. Why it happened, I can't. I can't.
I mean, I
explain
think it
it.
is though. Back then, there wasn't really as
But I
many
mean,
people.
if you think about it from a scientific perspective, right? If you think about it from a scientific perspective, is incest just mathematically avoidable? Like at some point, there was like the first human.
It is the chicken versus the egg
Yeah,
conversation.
it's like those. How did they reproduce? It's like there must have been one genealogy different. Like let's just take spirituality out of it and go from the scientific, just pure science. They're still incest. Like I just can't. I'm trying to think about it mathematically. It's
No,
like,
that's the thing that
It's
like,
like,
it's
there's
used
the same
as
thing.
I don't. I'm glad that you're saying this because it's usually used as a level of like to try to dismiss the Bible to a certain degree, like utilizing people's thought processes on incest. But it's like if you look at the animal kingdom, name one that wasn't a product of incest. It was all coming from life, coming from these cells that were reproducing into more cells and reproducing into more cells until the cells split. And then what is that cell splitting? That's coming from one thing into
Yeah,
two.
exactly.
And then how do those reproduce? By fucking. That's just
At its
it's
core,
in
that's what it
nature.
is. Yeah, it's like you're reproducing.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too much into it. I was just
Just acknowledging it.
I was just genuinely curious because I didn't know because I wasn't sure if there was like some text maybe that kind of
There's
explain
literally
that.
it's very interesting. There's literally a whole book of the Bible. It's called Deuteronomy. It's literally a list of names. It's after Genesis and there's Deuteronomy. It just lists it lists the alleged genealogy, right? It gives you it gives you some sort of explanation how do we go from Adam and Eve to a bunch of or a quote unquote civilization of any kind.
Is there also an explanation of why people live to be like 700 to 900 years old, and then we kind of
Yeah, basically because of sin. In the simplest form I can explain it is because of sin.
Yeah.
Because they just had so much time to where it's like they weren't taking advantage at the time. All they were doing was sinning, and God's like, hey, there's a problem here. Like, you aren't being good, you aren't being fruitful, so let me go ahead and cut it down. And that's one of the things that Ken Hovind was talking about. He has a chart, dude. Like everything that I like asked him, like he had a chart for, dude. And I was like, that's pretty neat, like he's ready for everything. So I was just like,
Oh,
damn,
yeah.
like I had my work cut out for me when I asked him these questions. And so yeah, basically it went from like 900 to 700 to 400 to 200, and now it's like supposed to be 120 or 75 according to Psalms. So yeah, that's the average life expectancy. Now you can add like processed food and all this other vaccines and all this other stuff because again this stuff's real. We can get into the whole dynamic of that, but it's like
that affects it.
yeah,
affects us
there's
too,
a lot of things
ultimately.
working against this.
Yeah, you want to bring up his yeah, could bring that up too. Oh yeah, you go ahead.
The Anointed Men's Podcast. Listen on Spotify, YouTube. The Instagram is right here. I believe you can just click that little button right there, and it'll pull you. Oh, maybe it won't. All right, we'll fix that. But check out the pod. We got 3 episodes live right now. Do you have another one dropping soon?
Yeah, I'm actually dropping one tomorrow, which is
Hell
the
yeah, dude.
interview with Ken Hovind.
That'll be coming out soon.
No, not yet. No.
Nice.
Hell yeah, dude. I thought that was the first one because I saw Theologian.
Yeah, no. So Could you let us know about Ken Hovind for those of you who don't know? That's going to be his next podcast that's released. It'll probably be because I'll probably release this today, Sunday. I'll probably have this one out this Friday, so he would have already released it. It'll be almost a week, probably close
Correct.
to.
So yeah, so Kent Hovind was one of the pioneers of debating. He debated, I think he said on Friday, 389 atheists. So that's a lot. You know, that's a lot.
What?
Like, yeah, I'm like
Some Jubilee type?
Yeah, now again, he's like 72, I believe, 70 something. So that's a lifetime, man. You know, I think I've always said it, like, it's a blessing to get to old age. A lot of people don't. You know.
I mean, the Four Horsemen. I mean, just to end it off on this, where we begin, just going back to Sam Harris. Yeah, I don't know. He's a super smart guy, but he has some shit takes. I'm not gonna lie. The whole crux of his atheist argument, or not the crux, but one of his major things that he made his platform on is like the idea that there is no free will. But I would argue if you take away religion from it, like quantum mechanics suggests that the only explanation is free will, essentially. Like, when we have this superposition, like, what is determining what happens if not free will? I mean, you could say randomness, but then that doesn't really make sense, because then why would there be a deviation? It's already calculated if it's random. It's like there's some uncalculated aspect that happens in real time involving consciousness that determines like the nature of our reality, and this is based off quantum mechanics. So
well, the idea that chaos is the highest form of order is based on the idea that free will must exist, because for free will to exist, it creates chaos.
Yeah.
It's like, I cannot put this on a line, and even if I do, you're going to choose to fucking draw outside of it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, we could wrap it up there. Is there anything you want to leave the people with before we go? Anything you want to say or tell, or anything you want to plug in, promote?
Yeah, I'd say that everyone, you know, in this world is on a different, you know, a different stage in their spiritual walk, you know, and even if you don't believe now, I hope and I pray that you will one day, you know, and that the truth can be revealed to you, because essentially that's what we all want. We all want the truth. We're surrounded by so much propaganda and, you know, ideologies that it's hard to try to, you know, make your way through that. So it's
Dogma.
like, yeah. And so just, you know, if you seek the higher power, if you seek God, He will reveal Himself to you. He will tell you the truth. You know, and I encourage everybody to accept Christ. And you know, in my life, I know that's the truth. And you know, that's what it is.
Yeah. Kind of going off of that, guys. Just, you know, show people a little bit more love. Right, helping hand, reach out. You know, just a little bit of kindness every day. I know it's cheesy, it's corny, but it really does make a difference. And, you know, a little bit does go a long way. You never know what someone's going through. One moment could really change someone's day, their week, honestly, even their lives at a certain point. You just don't know.
And what's funny is that that's only cheesy and corny because you live in a world that makes you think it's cheesy and corny. Fucking awesome to give a fuck about people.
All right, guys, it's time for y'all to get baptized.
I'll baptize you. See me on the court, motherfucker. No.
All the kind words, and then you gotta. All right. Well, we'll catch you guys next week. Thank y'all for tuning in, and thank you again, Francisco, for coming on and talking with us.
Thank y'all.
It's been a good time.
All right.
Y'all have a good one, you guys.
God bless.
Anointed Men Podcast. Go fucking check it out.
Amen.